What's going on, guys? Today we are talking about triggers, Glock triggers. And right here beside me, I have 3 different kinds of triggers. And so before we get into this video, comment what trigger you use down below. I'm not kind of reviewing like every trigger out there, but I have a couple of my favorites here and we're gonna see if it makes a difference, right? So even though I don't have the Timney or the Overwatch or some other popular ones, these ones are my personal favorite, and we're gonna see if it even matters upgrading your trigger. Will it really make a difference? So first we have the Glock 34, and this right here has the Johnny Glocks competition trigger, which actually this is pretty crazy. I got this down to about 1.5 pounds, maybe 2 pounds, give or take. The Glock 47 right here that has the bob cut, that is going to be the OEM trigger for our baseline test. And then we have my carry gun, which is also a Glock 47 with an apex and a minus connector. So that's all that's done to this one, apex minus connector. It also has the Johnny Glocks striker spring, but that's OEM. He just hand polishes it. So that actually did help take down a little bit of weight. I would say the pull on this is right at 3 pounds, maybe a little bit under, but we're gonna review each trigger kind of individually. So let's start with this Glock 34 right here. So of course, like I said, this was the Johnny Glocks competition trigger, and I'm gonna get you guys to come out here in the light. All right, so for this trigger, the Johnny Glock one, like I said, this one is right at about 1.5 to 2 pounds. So you have the wall right there, just a little bit of wall, and you can actually adjust the pre-travel on this wall. There's a little set screw that's right up there at the top, which I don't know if you'll be able to see, but there's a set screw up there so you can adjust the pre-travel if you want to. I just don't like that. I like having a little bit of pre-travel to my wall. So a little bit of pre-travel, and then it's kind of mushy, to be honest, but it's super light and the reset is positive. So that's 2 things that I look for, the poundage and the reset. So not a lot of travel, pretty much no over travel after you have that break. It's just a little mushy after the wall. You have the reset, which is aggressive. So the full trigger, pull again. You have a little bit of take up, wall, little mushy, and then a break. So this is the Johnny Glocks competition trigger. I do have a minus connector in here, which his does not come with. And the wall is a little bit crisper, like there's not as much mush, but it's a little bit heavier. So I try to get this one to just as light as I could just to play around with it. So again, right under 2 pounds, I would say 1.5 to 2 pounds, aggressive or positive reset. Very good trigger. This is my Glock 34. All right, so up next we have the 47 with the apex. Again, this is clear gun. So we have just a little bit of take up, and then you need a pretty good wall. This one has more take up than the last one. And then after the wall, nowhere near as mushy. Reset super short and also super aggressive. So this trigger is what I carry and compete with most of the time. Not a lot of travel whenever it comes to reset. It pushes your finger forward, and then the break is also still really light. So this is, I have a little bit of bias towards this trigger. This one so far is my favorite and what I use more often, but we're gonna see if that really even makes a difference today. So that's the apex. Next up is gonna be the Glock 47 with just the OEM. And so everybody knows the OEM Glock trigger, little bit of take up, definitely the most out of the 3. Take up, definitely the most crisp defined wall, probably tied with the apex on aggressiveness towards the reset, how much it pushes your finger forward, but more travel than the apex on the reset. The only thing that this trigger wins on is going to be the wall. The wall of this trigger, as soon as it reaches that wall, it breaks immediately. It's a good crisp defined wall, and the poundage on this one is just like any other Glock trigger, about 5.5, 6 pounds, depending on the Glock you had. This one's on the lighter side of 5.5 pounds. So that's all 3 of the triggers. We're gonna go ahead and get into testing some of them and see how they do. All right, so up first we just have the Glock 47 with the OEM trigger as a baseline test, and we're gonna start all of these from a compressed ready. One, to take the inconsistency of like the draw out, because I could get a good or a bad grip and that has nothing to do with the trigger. So we're just going to simply do a build drill. We're going to do a build drill for each one. We're going to write down the times. and then we're gonna do a couple more tests. But yeah, just a bill drill to start. So we're gonna be at 7 yards, and then we're gonna record the hits and the times to see which one wins. So yeah, let's go ahead and do this. Do you guys like my new mic? I am all the way out of the camera. I'm about 10 yards away right now, grabbing the shot timer, and you guys can probably still hear me. So let me know if you like the new mic. Listen to this. That is not my hands, that was my ass cheeks. So if you could hear that, then you know this mic is pretty damn good.
Stop it. Get some help.
All right, so Glock 47, OEM trigger, up first, compress ready, 7 yards, bill drill. Let's get it going. So we have a 186 all alphas. 186 all alphas for the OEM trigger. I think we're gonna do the other Glock 47 next. All right, up next we have the Glock 47 with the Apex trigger and the minus connector, compress ready, bill drill, 7 yards. That one was a 183, and I did drop a Charlie, which I don't think was any fault to the trigger. That was definitely just... All right, so 183, I did drop one Charlie, which was no fault to the trigger whatsoever. If anything, my grouping was actually a little bit tighter. It was just a bad sight confirmation before I did press the trigger. So 183 with one Charlie for the Apex. Last but not least, we have the 34 with the Johnny Glocks combat or a competition trigger and a minus connector. .194, again, all alpha. Did have a little bit of trigger freeze. Let's do that one more time just to see. I'm not going to count it. I'm still going to count the 194. Trigger freeze again. That was a 174 though. I think that was just a faster first shot. Got a line breaker right there, but still all alpha. Next, we're not going to do anything involving time. What we're actually going to do is just a 5-shot grouping at 25. Back at 25 yards using a clean target. I'm going to aim center A zone for this gun, and then 2 different spots like the outside Charlie and the outside Charlie for either side for the other 2 guns. And we're going to see who has the smallest grouping of 5 rounds at 25 yards. So again, no time zone. I'm going to speed this up just a little bit, and we'll look at the results after. Next up, OEM trigger on the 47. We'll be aiming at the left D zone, delta. And last but not least, we have the 47 with the Apex trigger. Be aiming at the right side. Okay, so I actually just realized I shot 6 shot with the Johnny Glocks trigger, the 34. Counting the 6 shot, which was that one, without counting the 6 shot, that would have had a very tight group at 25 yards. The 6 shot kind of threw it. With the OEM trigger, also not a bad grouping at all, but they were a little bit high, and as you can see, kind of left for the most part. And that has something to do for sure with the trigger being heavier. Having to pull it a little bit harder just throws your shots a little bit further to the left. And then you have the Apex trigger on the right side with another good grouping. None of these really have a bad grouping. I'll let you guys really decide who won. It would definitely be the Glock 34 if I wouldn't have shot the extra shot. I mean, by far, that's, you know, 2-inch grouping with the flyer. I'll let you guys decide this. Honestly, probably the 47 was the most accurate, but yeah, this is tough. This just goes to show that it really comes down to fundamentals, and the lighter trigger helps. The lighter trigger on the 34 definitely had the best starting group, the best initial group. If you exclude this, the 34 with that super light trigger definitely helps with the far away shots. There's not as much input on the gun or your trigger finger that you have to overcome. So I'll let you guys decide who won this one, but we'll go ahead and move on to the next drill. So I actually changed my mind. I kind of do want to do some draws and see if not only consistency changes with different triggers, but if I can also just be a little bit faster because the trigger press helps. So at first, we're gonna start out with the 34 right here, and yeah, get some first shots. We're at 7 yards. I'm gonna be aiming for an A zone. I will only count the shot if it's an A zone hit. So let's see. That was a little slow, got a 122. 103. 104. That was just a little bit outside of the Charlie. 2 more. That was a second even. And 101. All right, so the last shot was 101. The fastest shot with the 34 is gonna be a second even. So let's switch to the next gun and see if we can beat that. All right, up next, we're gonna have the 47 with the apex and the minus. 1 second is the time to beat from the Johnny Glocks trigger. 93. All right, started off strong with this one. 96. That was just barely inside the line. 88. Yeah, that was just barely inside the alpha, just on that far right side. We got one more. Almost jumped the gun a little bit, 95. I hesitated because I started to shoot a little bit sooner. So we got those. Actually, I didn't throw a single Charlie on those. All 5 of them were alpha. I threw 2 Charlies with the Glock 34, the Johnny Glocks, and not a single Charlie. All alphas with the 47 and the apex. And the fastest time was in 88. So that's gonna be hard to beat. We're gonna see if we can do it. Changing the damn light on each gun because I only brought 1 light and my holster is a light bearing holster is quite annoying and takes precious time out of my shooting day. But the things I do for you guys. Up next, 47 with an OEM trigger. Let's see if we can beat 88. 98. 88 exactly, but that was a bad shot. That was a delta. That was a delta. I pulled that one for sure. 96, that was just outside of the A zone. That was a low Charlie, just barely. 112, and it was a Charlie. All right, hold on. Let me calm down with this OEM. 93. That was just pushing that about as hard as I can go. Actually, one last shot. Let's see if we can get a headshot from the hip. Nope, delta. Okay, so 93. 93 was the fastest. No, actually I got an 88, but it was a Charlie. So 93 is gonna have to be the fastest for the OEM trigger. All right, so this actually probably turned out how I hoped it would. This probably actually turned out the best to prove a point that I was saying at the beginning of the video. So if I got everything wrote down here, OEM trigger won the bill drill. Just because I threw that 1 Charlie with the apex. The apex was a little bit faster, but I threw the 1 Charlie. So OEM won the bill drill. The grouping test, I'm gonna say that the Johnny Glocks trigger won the grouping test. I know I said it was up to you guys, but if I wouldn't have threw that extra shot, that six shot, the Johnny Glocks would have definitely won by far, which makes sense. Lightest trigger, far distance, not as much to pull, not as much movement, not as much input from your trigger finger. So that makes sense, right? And then with the draws, the apex won. And I think that has something to do with, one, I'm familiar with it, but also the OEM trigger was kind of the hardest thing. Like I threw 3 or 4 Charlies with the OEM trigger, and that's because it was so much heavier. I was going to break that shot and dipping down, especially under speed like that. When you're trying to get like under a second draw from 7 yards. When you try to pull that trigger, I threw that 1 delta was from the hip, but 1 delta and then 1, 2, 3 Charlies. So I only had the 1 alpha. I only had the 1 alpha with the OEM trigger. And that's also something that I could improve with if I started working on it with that trigger. But I think that definitely goes to show that the heavier trigger does affect a little bit on the draws in that first quick shot. So regardless of that, all 3 triggers won in their own category. So what does that mean? It means that it doesn't really matter what trigger you have. It matters what your fundamentals are. All right. It matters how good your fundamentals are. And that's going to determine how well you shoot. You guys see me getting swole? Anyways, that's going to determine how well you shoot. Each trigger won its own category. If I did 5 different tests, or I did this test over 10 different times, it'd probably be the same. The Apex trigger would probably win out because I shoot that the most. So whatever you shoot the most, whatever you use is going to be what you're best with. And it really doesn't matter that much. I will say that I think having a better trigger does help, but it's minimal. If you have limited money or not that much time to train, I would put all of your money into ammo and get good with what you have. All right. I would say that really the only thing that a trigger helps with is going to be the 2 things that the different triggers went on. If you're shooting really far away, it's going to help a little bit. I still didn't shoot a bad group with the OEM trigger. And then with your quick, first shot draw, it did have a little bit of an input with the heavier trigger. But that's something that if you practice with, that would fix itself. So it really doesn't matter what trigger you have. Train with what you have. And then whenever you get up to a level where a new trigger could help you, then change triggers. That's my input. That's my 2 cents. But you guys seen the test. I could have definitely went a little bit more in detail about each one. I could have done a little bit more, I know, but I'll have limited time, limited money, limited ammo because you guys haven't subscribed and, all this other stuff. So subscribe, by the way, it definitely helps a lot. But just train with what you have. That's it. If you guys have any questions, let me know down in the comments. Make sure you guys comment what trigger you have down below so we can have some conversations and I can get to know you guys a little bit better down in the comment section. Make sure to like, subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm out. Bow.